Speakcies.
Welcome to Origin of Speakcies, episode 135. I'm Steve, here with my good friend Scott. Before we get going today, please like and subscribe to Origin of Speakcies on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star rating along with a positive review on Apple Podcasts. And also give us your money. Go to patreon.com/Speakcies to become a Speakcies supporter. Again, that's patreon.com/Speakcies. Today's topic is the origin and history of propaganda. Also, Scott's going to bring us some new slang. And also, we'll have our first appearance from Hitler. So that's something. So now I've said Hitler out loud, on to propaganda. So when I hear someone say propaganda, I always think of something pejorative. I've never heard the word propaganda and go, all right, propaganda. We really need more of that.
Right.
I think of manipulation. I think it's something that provokes extremes of emotion and response without logic and reason behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hear somebody say, that's just propaganda. And it's just understood that there's a negative connotation with the word. That's how it is used. Yeah. It has always been used in my life, for sure.
Yeah, no one has ever brought something up to you and said, you know what, you're really going to like this. We're going to talk about some great new propaganda that we've just heard about.
Right.
So one of the things that really excited me about this is, and I think you know this, but anyone listening, do they know that propaganda actually started as an official department of the Catholic Church, and it still exists today? So if you didn't know that, you do now. But let's not stop here. It's time to learn more about propaganda.
Good. So, this is a good one. I feel like that word has been coming up a lot recently. Yeah. I feel like I've heard it on other podcasts and things, when describing maybe some things that are going on currently.
Yeah.
So it's a good timing.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And I think it's also something, too, that's always good to kind of to be a defensive listener, regardless of where you get your information, is to always kind of be just, I always listen with caution for anything. So I think, to be on the lookout for propaganda is a good thing. And we'll certainly hit on that as we proceed. So we start our journey with our friends at Edom Online, defining propaganda, origin, Catholic Church, Committee of Cardinals in charge of foreign missions of the Catholic Church, short for Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, Congregation for Propagating the Faith, a committee of cardinals established in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV to supervise foreign missions.
Cool.
So I think one of the things that's exciting about this is I kind of got through my little mock Italian, and it really wasn't that bad.
You did a really good job. You nailed it. And before you go on, I think that we should see if we could decree stuff. I would decree, how there's a murder of crows and there's like a gaggle of geese or whatever. I think a committee of cardinals would be good. Like you see a bunch of cardinals. By the way, though, nobody uses those terms. I remember seeing like bird watchers and they're like, nobody says murder of crows or any of these other things. It's just a flock or a group. But anyway, it's fun to say murder of crows and it's fun to say a committee of cardinals. I like it.
Agree with you 110%. Next time you're hanging out with bird watchers, give me a call and we'll straighten those guys out. Because they sound like people I'd still probably lose a fight to them, but I'd get a couple shots in before I was beaten senseless.
Yeah, of all the groups of people that I think I'd still have a chance against, I think bird watchers is up there. But I could be wrong.
So this is something else from Edom Online that's not really, I think, critical to the story, but it's just a fun sentence to read. The word is properly the ablative feminine gerundive of the Latin propagare, to set forward, extend, spread, increase. So ablative feminine gerundive, which I've never said that word out loud, gerund with an IVE on it. So that was just fun.
Yeah.
Propaganda's paying off already just for that.
Absolutely. I'm still confused by what you just said.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here going, okay, I was an English major and I took pride at one point in knowing what a gerund was. It's one of those things. It has something to do with I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I just Googled it. I'm trying to read it. And I don't remember what it means. Something to do with a verb that refers to a noun or something like that.
Something like that. But
a verb that turns into a noun or something.
I believe that's related. And I saw that and I was so excited by the word that I also didn't take the time to look it up. So at least you've tried. which is more effort than I put into it.
If by tried you mean a quick failed Google search, I guess that I did try. But
yeah, hey, you did try. So continuing from Edom Online, they define the modern usage of it. The modern political sense of dissemination of information intended to promote a political point of view dates from World War I, not originally pejorative or implying bias or deliberately being misleading, meaning essentially propagate to advance a cause. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense when you look at the original definition being starting with the Catholic Church and their department intent on propagating the faith, that as the years go by, it becomes something else that's pretty much related to where it came from. It doesn't, I think, stray too far from its origin.
Right.
With that.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because the Catholic Church was upfront about, here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're spreading the gospel, or we're spreading the faith, the Catholicism, and it's called propaganda because we're, as you said. Yeah. But I think the reason maybe it turned into a pejorative over the years, or has a negative connotation, is because there's a feeling of, well, I'm being sold something. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like the intentions are to convert me literally, to whatever the cause is. And I think there's a natural pushback to that. And maybe it accumulated over years of that. But, you can kind of see how it would go from get to that place.
And I think it's interesting, too. This is obviously something that predates the Catholic Church. There have always been, your empire, or your tribe, or your clan wasn't out there saying good things about their enemies or people that they were blaming for things. Mm-hmm. I think, the Catholic department here obviously gives it some more of a formal body for this to happen. But I don't know if you picked up when I discussed what came from Edom Online, that World War I was a key date when we see propaganda come together and also be seen as pejorative. So as we go through, we'll spend some time on World War I, which is fun for everybody. Yeah. And maybe we'll see a failed Bavarian painter show up too. And it'll all come together. So on to the Catholic Church. So from Merriam-Webster in their entry on the history of propaganda. Propaganda today is most often used in reference to political statements, but the word comes to our language through its use in a religious context. The Congregatio de Propaganda Fide, Congregation for Propagating the Faith, was an organization established in 1622 by Pope Gregory XV. It's a means of furthering Catholic missionary activity. So just a reminder that Edom Online agrees with Merriam-Webster. And I'm going to give a little bit of, 1622 being the year it comes in, just to give a little Western civilization history to lead us up to that. So 1517, Martin Luther posts his 95 Theses, normally seen as the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. 1521, the Edict of Worms, Martin Luther is excommunicated. 1534, Henry VIII breaks with the Catholic Church so he can get married or divorced or something like that. And then 1542, the Roman Inquisition was started to combat Protestantism, which they saw as a heresy. So starting out with the Protestant Reformation, I give these key dates to state that the official counter to that from the Catholic Church, called the Counter-Reformation, starts in the year 1545 with the beginning of the Council of Trent, where basically the Catholic Church reviews everything that Protestants have brought up and says, no thanks. So with that, the Counter-Reformation begins. But it's not until 1622 that we see the founding of the Office of Propaganda, or Department of Propaganda, or the Congregation for the Evangelicalization of Peoples, which is how they prefer to be called.
Yeah, the peoples.
The peoples. And maybe that's why, and thank you for bringing that back up. I occasionally will go back. I forget what episode that Zorro the Gay Blade was discussed ad nauseum in. But it is a very underrated movie, and George... It
made an impact. Oh, yeah, George Hamilton, right.
George Hamilton is as both roles as Don Diego and Bunny Wigglesworth. Yeah. I don't think he won an Oscar for that, but he still brings joy to me.
You know what, though? And what's the real reward is the fact that every time somebody says peoples, I think of, what is it? Bunny
Wigglesworth talking about the peoples.
The peoples. It's really funny. That's better than an Oscar,
yeah.
In my book.
It's a gift that keeps on giving. So to dig a little bit more into the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples, I'm going to go back to Wikipedia. That gives a little bit more context of where the Reformation was when the time this started. When the body was created, the administration of colonial territories was increasingly controlled by the Dutch and the English, both intent on spreading Protestantism. By the end of 1648 until the end of the 30 Years' War, the official Catholic-Protestant balance in Europe appeared settled, but vast regions of Asia, Africa, and the Americas were both underdeveloped and contested. So Europe, for a very long time, was in the throes of the Reformation, very bloody. One of the reasons why when the United States was founded, that whereas God is mentioned in the Constitution, there is certainly no reference to a specific Church of America. People did not want to relive the time of Reformation. But as noted there was a lot of ground to be propagated. So therefore, the Catholic Church developed their own department of missionaries to propagate the faith.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a feature of Christianity in general, to do that. So it makes total sense. And for anybody that didn't like that, could have been way worse, because propaganda is at least, well, you're going to get into it, but it's mainly, like pamphlets and stuff or whatever. It could have been the Mongols or whatever, which is how you became a Belgian Mongolian, just taken over by force. There are different ways to propagate yourself, and could be worse than some pamphlets.
It could be, and that would be a great pamphlet. Become Catholic. It could be worse. That maybe is something that they could still use. So one of the things I also enjoyed about learning about the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples.
There's got to be a way to make that into a abbreviate that. It's tough to say. It's tough to listen to, much less say.
It's fun. I like it, but it gives me a chance to say people, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Congregation, what is it again? Congregation of?
For the Evangelization of Peoples.
CFEP. Yeah, no, it's better. It's better just saying it out. Yeah. I stand corrected.
It's okay. You tried again. You tried on Google and you tried on this too. So I like the effort that you're putting into this.
Absolutely, man. I came to play tonight.
One of the things I enjoyed was looking at the people who were the prefects, or basically in charge of the CEP. We'll call it that for now. So the first guy that was in charge, the first cardinal, was Antonio Maria Soli. He started in 1622, and he also left in 1622. So I did some research to see if there was some big story, why he left or if he died. He lived a few years afterwards. I couldn't see any reason. Maybe he just it was his idea, and he wanted to be noted in the history books that he was the first guy, and it worked.
It's a good plan.
We're talking about him here today, yeah.
It's a good plan, because you don't have to burn yourself out. You start something, you call it something cool, and then you bail out. And people always have to say your name because, well, I was going to say no one ever says the second person, but I've got a feeling that you might give us the second person.
And your feeling is correct. So the second guy is a cardinal by the name of Ludovico Ludavisi, and he was in charge from 1622 to 1632. Now, it might surprise you that he was Italian.
Yeah.
I don't know if you picked up on that from his name, that both cardinals so far were Italian.
Yeah, it was Lucky Luciano or something.
Well, speaking of Lucky, I think that's a good way to describe Ludovico. His uncle, Alessandro Ludavisi, became Pope. He was Pope Gregory the 15th. So pretty well-connected guy. That's got to be, a pretty good way to get into restaurants or cut in front of line when your uncle's the Pope.
Well, that's just the Bob's your uncle situation.
Yeah. Pope's your uncle.
Pope's your uncle. Right. Pope Bob or Pope. Wait, Alessandro.
Yeah, but he became Gregory the 15th.
Oh, that's right. Oh, wait, the other guy was Alexander. Man, daggone, I was so proud of myself. I'm going to keep trying, though. That's going to be my new catchphrase. who is it? Dusty Slay has. We're having fun. I'm just going to be. I'm trying.
Yeah. And who's that Pope? I think they're good things. We'll give them some soft link.
Pope.
That could be after we run out of who's that Lil. We could maybe do that too. So I'm not going to beat it to death, but I'm going to come close to beating it to death. I did want to talk about the next person who was a cardinal, Antonio Barberini. So
I loved him on Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, I was thinking the same thing too. Very good reference there. So what's interesting about him is he served as prefect from 1632 to 1671. Wow. However, he took a break from 1645 to 1649. Essentially, he had a feud with the next pope, Pope Innocent X, and he had to hide out in France for a few years.
Wow.
So that's got to be weird. You know, it's got to be really nice and probably strange to have your uncle as pope. Yeah. But to get on the wrong side of the pope, and from what I could find doing some research, it seems like he was siding with another person to be pope, and he was on the wrong side of that horse race, I guess. Yeah. But whatever it was, there was a marriage within the family later that seemed to straighten out everything, and he was able to come back, and again, from 1649 to 1671, was able to be in charge of the peoples. He's like,
I'm back, bitches. We're propagating again. My way.
I think that's a quote, actually. I looked that up. I think you've been cheating on my notes. So we've talked a lot about Italians so far. Big surprise. But there's also, office is still around. So let's see. And do you think there's an Italian still in charge?
Well, I mean, my gut would say probably, but we now, people have immigrated. It could be, could really be anybody. So hit me.
I will hit you. It's one of my peoples is now in charge. So the current prefect is Luis Antonio Gokum Tangle. He's a Filipino cardinal of the Catholic Church who's been in charge since, I believe, December of 2019. So one of the things I like about him is pretty close to being Belgian Mongolian, I'd say. So good for him. He also prefers to go by his nickname Chito rather than his clerical title.
And it must have been a really tough decision whether or not he should get this position or be a nurse. Like all the other Filipinos. Sorry. That's my Filipino humor.
That is.
That was Scott, not Steve. And I'm not Filipino. But I did live in the Philippines.
There you go. So you can get away. And also, I'm Belgian Mongolian. So I'll let you get away with that. It's fine.
And it's not bad. It's a lot of Filipinos are nurses. Yeah. But this guy stepped it up a notch and became the leader of the
peoples. Peoples. So a lot of Italians were in charge of this, but now one of my peoples is in charge of the people. So shout out to Chito, and I hope he continues to do a good job. So propaganda actually starts with the Catholic Church, an official armed department or curia of the Catholic Church intent on propagating the faith that's still going today and has a Filipino gentleman who goes by Chito in charge of it now.
That was quite entertaining.
Well, thank you. So before I discuss propaganda in the modern sense, Scott, you have some new slang for us.
Let's do some new slang.
Let's do some new slang.
New slang when you notice the stripes.
Alrighty then. So, a term that I have been hearing lately, and I'll tell you where I've been hearing it in a minute, is love bombing.
Love bombing.
And it's something I had heard maybe, I don't know, over the last couple of years, once or twice, and sort of was not sure. I mean, because when you hear that, I don't know if it's like, hey, it's Valentine's Day and you give your significant other a ton of chocolate and balloons and teddy bears, and it's a love bomb. But it actually, much like, not anything like propaganda, but it does have also a negative connotation, and I will explain why. But are you familiar with the term love bombing? Have you been hearing this pop up at all?
I haven't heard it pop up lately, but I'm familiar with it. And can I say what I think it means?
Go for it, yeah.
I believe it's like when you pretty much overdo it with someone, you show way too much affection to the point of, I believe we've done a new slang, try hard, before.
Yeah.
Like when you're trying just a little bit too hard to show your affection, which seems to cover up, it's covering up another deficiency somewhere else.
Well, so that is a good guess, and it is close.
Okay, good.
But it goes, and that's kind of what I thought too. But then you think about that, and you're saying, okay, well, I guess that's kind of negative because you're maybe trying to cover up, like you said, something else, or you just look bad because you're trying too hard. That would be negative. But it's actually much more sinister than that when you get to what love bombing really is and the effects of it. So I was listening to one of our favorite podcasts, Red Scare, and they were talking about something that I had not heard of. I think partially because I'm not on TikTok. Apparently, this was a huge TikTok thing. Did you hear about this West Elm Caleb guy?
No, I have not heard of that yet.
Okay, so here's the quick version of it is a guy got on Tinder, and his name is Caleb, and he put, I'm a designer at West Elm. West Elm is like a furniture store or something.
Okay.
I think there's one at the Short Pump Mall.
All right.
So anyway, the controversy came up when he was called out by, I don't know how many, like a lot of ladies who claimed that he basically love bombed every single one of them. He was dating. And so what he was doing was he was using the same, like, not catchphrases, but what do you call it? He was hitting on them and using a pickup line.
Yeah.
The same thing. He would just like cut and paste everybody. He was like, I made you this special playlist, and he was giving it to everybody.
Oh.
He was using like his same selfies. I mean, it wasn't a catfish situation. It was him, but he just essentially got called out for it really hardcore. And then what happened from there was really weird, which was, because it became viral on TikTok, a bunch of brands, you know how this thing, which I don't like, it was funny at first when Wendy's was kind of doing it, but how like brands will get on whatever's viral and try to like jump in on it. So for example, the, who was it? It was Uno, the game Uno, tweeted and said, if you need a skip card so that you don't end up with a West Elm Caleb, whatever, there was some other place that was like, none of our stuff is designed by West Elm Caleb. It just became this thing. Okay. So I said, love bombing. Okay, what's the big deal? And on the Red Scare, they were kind of defending the guy. Like, look, this is what dating is. Like, this is kind of what it is now, which, you know, when you're on these apps, you kind of do this stuff. So what's so wrong with love bombing? Well, that brings me to another podcast I thoroughly enjoyed. I just finished it. I think it was only 6 or 7 episodes, called Sweet Bobby. And I won't give too much away because it's one of these ones with a lot of twists and turns. Okay. But the same thing happens with this woman who gets completely love bombed by this doctor that she meets online. What could go wrong, right? Right. And what happens during the course of the show, which I'm not giving anything really away because this is right off the bat, is because of and what happens with love bombing is you gain control, you're manipulating the person. And I mean, honestly, well, let me read the definition that this guy, Dale Archer, who's a psychologist, he identifies the phrase love bombing with the acronym IDD: intense, ideation, devaluation, and then discard, and then repeat. So let me say it again: intense, ideation, devaluation, and discard. So it's, you start with the love bomb, but then you kind of withdraw, and then they want it. They're addicted to it. And what happens is, sometimes, especially if it's an online relationship, you can keep that control of somebody because you have been love bombing them for so long, but then whenever you withdraw it, they just want more of it. They're going, oh, you used to text me 12 times a day. Yeah. Now I didn't hear from you. And it's just this really kind of rough thing. And he said, the way that you can identify this behavior, if you feel like maybe it's happening to you, and by the way, if you just Google love bomb, there are 25 articles that have come out in the last year that are the same thing, like how to be able to tell, because this has really come out in the last year or so. If you're being love bombed. But he says, stop. To break or to identify the behavior pattern, SLL, stop, look, and listen, which is after which breaking off contact, the abuser can become more possible by also seeking support. What? Okay. Forget that part. But all I could think of is this is basically the dentist system. I mean, so the dentist system, for anybody that doesn't know what it is from Dennis Reynolds from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he has his technique, which he spelled out in the show, which is his name, Dennis, D, demonstrate value, engage physically, nurture dependence, neglect emotionally, my favorite one, inspire hope, and then separate entirely. So, honestly, it really is that. But
it is. I've been fighting saying it. I didn't want to jump in. I'm like, he's got to know this. It was my gosh.
Yeah, I knew. I kind of saw the gleam in your eye, and I'm like, don't take the dentist system from me. I wanted to. Yes, it is that. But so, as I said before, I mean, it is something that can be made worse on because of social media and all these other things. But where did it come from? And where did the term come from? And then how is this used? Well, like I said before, of course it's used in like dating, but it's used in all sorts of ways. Gangs use this type of behavior. Pimps use this type of behavior to manipulate and control the people that they want to control. Mm-hmm. Usually it is a narcissist that exhibits this type of behavior in the severe. Right. I think anybody can kind of do it accidentally. I mean, I've definitely had times where there's been somebody maybe in my life who, when you first meet, you kind of get in that. Another term for this whole love bomb thing is when you're in your honeymoon phase, right? Yeah. The honeymoon phase isn't supposed to last forever. It doesn't, right? You kind of get over that, and then you maybe have a more mature relationship post that. Nobody keeps a honeymoon phase going forever. A love bomber is going to really go hard in that honeymoon phase, bring it back a little bit, and just keep you emotionally jacked up. So again, where did it come from? Well, there is a wonderful article. I said there were a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. There's jenkiaba.com, jenkiaba.com has an article, which was just I think it was like late 2021, called What is Love Bombing? Mm-hmm. And, she makes some points where she says, hey, getting ghosted, which is the last thing that happens a lot of times with, the love bomb situation, is probably best case scenario. It could be a lot worse, which is you could end up in a cult, which is where the term came from. Mm. And it was a specific cult, which is the church. What is it? The Unification Church, right? It's the
Moonies.
The Moonies. That's right. Some young moon guy. And so they had a specific, they called it love bombing. Yeah. And this is what they would do. They would wait for students on campus, and they would actually look for students that were sad, and then they'd walk alongside that person, strike up a conversation about the weather, what's going on, and they would just hardcore, even just lie about having mutual interest. I mean, you can sort of see how it plays out, right? And that's how a lot of cults work. I mean, that's how Children of God worked. A lot of these other ones where you just get this love bomb, but then it manipulates you into always sort of chasing that. And then when they're a jerk to you, when they're horrible to you, when they do these bad things, you sort of tie back to remembering what you had at the beginning. So anyway, so that's where it came from. It's still, the article that it first showed up in was in 1977. Psychology professor Dr. Margaret Singer wrote about it, but really she brought awareness to the whole idea of this in 1966 in her book Cults in Our Midst. And she sort of became aware of it during her work in the 70s, working with therapy for ex-cultists, people that had come out of a cult. So that's why it has such a negative connotation. Wow. And so I was a little surprised to find that it was more than just like kind of what you said at the beginning of going a little hard at the beginning and then tailing off. There's actually worse consequences, which is you become trapped in a terrible relationship or possibly a cult.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of tough to say if we like or dislike this one. Yeah. But I'm going to just say I dislike it, not necessarily because it represents such an awful thing, but I think it's better. I think the dentist system better describes how this functions. I think that's a very good way. And I am being a bit facetious, but when you think about it, like if you see the dentist system, it helps you identify when that's happening to you, when someone's trying to do that. It, puts it very bluntly, in not clinical terms.
Well, there's a reason why it's so funny. And so, we both remembered it so well, is because it's like actually really truly it's rooted in the reality of something that can happen, that people do. So I don't like it either, but I don't like it for the point you made, which is good. The dentist system is much better, but also the term is just too wide ranging. I think it's like, you can go anywhere from this guy used to text me 10 times a day, now he doesn't text me as much, to this person like purposefully brought me into a cult. So I don't like the term either, but I do think it hopefully was interesting to learn the whole story behind love bombing. And by the way, free West Elm Caleb. It's not his fault. And stay off TikTok, kids. And that was today's new slang.
I think the best lesson that came out of that is to stay off TikTok.
Yeah.
Unless you're Sam Ramsdale, or I'll tell you offline about someone that I'm trying to get to come on the show to discuss TikTok. That's related to this whole mess indirectly.
The West Elm Caleb mess?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, because again, I was listening to the Red Scare, and they're talking about how awful TikTok is. They would never do TikTok, but then they have to go, but our friend so-and-so who is she's brilliant and her TikToks are awesome. It's like everyone knows it, has at least one or two people that you're like,
right,
I can't shit on this too hard because somebody I like uses it.
And Sam Ramsdale is legitimately a very nice person. We've had a chance to talk to her. She's a great gal.
Yeah.
So
and we sit here and talk about TikTok being the worst, but Instagram foisted essentially TikTok on us with Reels. I mean, it's, as far as I understand, it's pretty much the same thing. And I wish there was like a toggle where you could toggle off Reels or something, but nope.
Unless it's Speakcies Reels. So if, since we're talking about Instagram, please check out to see what we've done at Speakcies on Instagram, and also Twitter, even though I'd say Twitter's not worth it. We have something there. If you're on there, follow us, but you have bigger problems if you're on Twitter. Yeah. Speaking of bigger problems, let's talk about propaganda in the modern sense. So the thing that's interesting, one of the things that's interesting to me about propaganda is I think it's subjective. There's not something that you can say, this thing is definitely propaganda. I mean, sometimes there's extremes where it's obvious, but there's more subjectivity to it. And I'm reminded of a famous quote from Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart when he's discussing hardcore pornography, and said, "I know it when I see it." And I feel the same way about propaganda. So lots of resources on this subject, but I chose one that I thought had a very interesting perspective based on what they do. And it was actually the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So they have a very good section on propaganda. I'm going to quote a lot from them here in the next few minutes. So they define propaganda as biased information designed to shape public opinion and behavior. And I think that's a very good answer. I mean, even if it's propaganda that you like, I think it being biased, there's no such thing as objective propaganda, that seems contradictory to itself. Propaganda in any sense, and even if it's for a good cause, is something that's certainly going to be biased.
Right. And by the way, another word, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being biased. Like, we're all biased. It's another one of those words that, just like discrimination is not bad either. I mean, these are all words that have these negative connotations, but
there's a reason. If I see someone dressed up like a Nazi, I'm going to be biased against them. I'm not going to go, well, maybe I need to understand their story.
Right.
That made them dress up like Himmler.
That's right. And I'm going to discriminate against those Germans as well.
Yeah, as you should. And I can say that as a partially German person, mostly Belgian Mongolian. Continuing from Holocaust Museum, of course, we're going to talk about the Germans. So we referenced before how World War I kind of framed propaganda in the modern sense. We're going to see a little bit more why. So quoting from them, World War I was the first time we saw use of modern propaganda. It was used very well against the Germans to help break their spirits. Images of the Germans as barbaric, brutal Huns sought world domination, the destruction of Western civilization. This portrayal reinforced reports of German atrocities, some real, some exaggerated, which helped convince their populations that were fighting against them of the righteousness of their cause and to continue fighting. So, propaganda was used to stand up the German allies. And one of the interesting pieces of propaganda that came out of World War I is the famous poster of Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam pointing and saying, "I want you for the U.S. Army," actually came from World War I.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So continuing from the Holocaust Museum, it was commonly held that Germany had lost World War I not on the battlefield, but because of Allied propaganda sapping the fighting strength of German troops and weakened morale at home by encouraging demands for peace. So we saw propaganda used by their allies to stand the allies up and unite them, but also to undermine the Germans in their homeland. So somebody that believed that unfortunately, the first appearance in our show is Adolf Hitler. So one of the reasons that was something that Hitler believed, that that propaganda really sapped the Germans, and one of the reasons he used it when the Nazi regime rose, having his own ministry of propaganda.
Yeah.
So it's our first legitimate appearance of Hitler in our show.
I believe it's the first time the H word has been used.
I think we've used it before to discuss how when people are on social media, the trend of if anyone disagrees with you, they're Hitler. But actual historical,
Hitler,
actual Hitler,
which is way worse.
Yeah, never want any Hitler.
Nothing trumps actual Hitler.
Yeah. So we made it to episode 135 before Hitler showed up. So
and we talked about Germans a lot. We've alluded to it. We've alluded to this, but now we're actually talking about it. Wow.
So I think it's something we want to commemorate. I don't know how. We're not going to make a shirt to commemorate that. However, if you want a shirt, and to be clear, a shirt that has nothing to do with Hitler, go to speakcies.com/store to access our TeePublic store. Lots of good merchandise.
Yeah.
All Hitler free.
Pick up the Charlie Chaplin shirt, though. No, there's not a Charlie Chaplin shirt.
Not yet.
It would be funny, though, if we said there's no Hitler shirts. And then
or this was the week one of us decided to break out a toothbrush mustache. But fortunately,
Michael Jordan. The only people to ever pull it off was Hitler, Charlie Chaplin, and Michael Jordan. I don't remember anyone else doing the Hitler mustache. I will never forget the Hanes commercial. I think Jordan's like on a plane, and I just remember looking at him going, why? What, like, and I think it must have just been because he's like, I can do whatever. Like, he probably had a bet because the guy did like to gamble. He said, I bet I can do a Hanes commercial with a Hitler mustache and nobody will say anything.
Or someone told him he couldn't do it.
Right.
And he took it personally.
I love, you and I, you can't talk about it enough, just how spiteful he is.
It's impressive.
My favorite thing, go ahead. You go ahead. Well, my favorite thing is, yes, there's the meme and the thing of like, I took that personal. But there's also, my favorite part, I will say, I've rewatched The Last Dance at least 5 times through. No joke. I watch it all the time. When I don't know what to watch, I just watch it. And I've started it from the beginning and watched it over and over and over. My favorite scene in the entire thing. Well, my favorite part is the Dennis Rodman stuff. But my favorite scene in the entire thing is when Jordan is playing that quarters game with his security staff. These guys make $42,000 a year, if that. Well, yeah. And he is genuinely mad if he loses a round of this like game where they flick the quarter against the wall and he has to keep playing until he wins. And I'm like, it's one thing to be, okay, Clyde Drexler isn't Michael Jordan and I'm going to dominate him in the finals. But to take your security staff and, anyway. That part.
Did they interview any of the security staff in that?
They do.
Okay.
I mean, there's the one guy with like the
one guy,
the Jufro, and then there's the black guy that kind of stepped in after he was the head of Jordan's security, and then once his dad died, he was kind of like a surrogate dad.
Okay,
but not too much. But he's Michael Jordan though.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I'd be more interested if none of them showed up. That if he took it, Michael Jordan took it a little too personally one time, and they had to go away for a while.
Yeah, well, they weren't there for his pops too soon. All right.
Yeah.
So how did we get here? Germany, Hitler.
We'll blame Hitler for this. Everyone else blames Hitler for this, and we'll join them for that.
This is what happens when you bring Hitler. When you bring actual Hitler.
When actual Hitler shows up. it becomes bad. But back to our article on propaganda from the U.S. Holocaust Museum. Not all propaganda is bad. Propaganda is used, I'm quoting from them, to shape opinion and behavior. Public health campaigns, for example, can utilize propaganda. Elections, even in democratic states, often display elements of propaganda as candidates and political parties vie for office. And the last sentence here is one that really resonates with me that I want to talk to you a little bit more about. The real danger of propaganda lies when competing voices are silenced, and unchecked, propaganda can have negative consequences.
Yeah.
So I really like this, again, because I think it was something that if any resource would be, I think, very unobjective about propaganda, I would say the Holocaust Museum. Studying World War II and propaganda, the propaganda that the Germans used to blame the Jews for everything is beyond despicable, and certainly, unchecked is incredibly negative with that. But, I think it's practical in a sense that, if I'm competing for your business or if my political candidate's going, I'm going to be biased. I'm going to be, put the shine on that person's positive qualities. Now, of course, on the other extreme, I'm going to tell you how bad the other candidate is. But that kind of gets to the idea of the marketplace of ideas, that as long as the other party has a chance to do that too. I think I'd prefer in our culture for us to do a little bit better job. We seem to be in a permanent negative campaign just all the time with everything. Yeah. And part of the reason we're in that way is because it works. Your candidate puts negative ads out there because it works on us. And
it's amazing it's amazing how that works, where you think, whoever has the most money is pretty much going to win because they're able to do, even though we mock the ads they do and everything else. Right. It works. It works on a lot of people, because you think about that terrible picture of the candidate in black and white, and it's like this person somehow helped the Taliban. It's hard to get that out of your head, when you're at the voting booth. Like, I don't want to vote for somebody that assisted the Taliban.
Yeah. And it made me think just a lot about our modern media culture that we have. And it's something we've talked about a lot on this show, of trying our best to not be right or left, to land in the middle and to be objective as much as we, potentially can. And, as we've said many times, if you voted for the 70-year-old bigot who put kids in cages, or if you voted for the other 70-year-old bigot who put kids in cages, we want you to listen to our show and give us money. And it makes me just think a little bit of just like the Fox versus CNN dynamic that seems to be out there right now, of I'll go back and forth between those sites, and just there's two different worlds. There's two different universes that they live in.
How different it is. And it's so predictable too. You sort of know what you're going to get. But in a way that's not even, it's not that horrible, because you do know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think what's horrible is when you think that things are objective, or things are supposed to be objective, and it really is propaganda.
Yeah.
I think most people, but see, it is bad though, because not every, I think you and I can sit here, not to say we're smarter than anybody else, but I think we kind of realize that. Maybe there are other things we don't realize, but I know that there are people that watch those channels and they wouldn't call it propaganda. They'd say this side is telling the truth. This side is a fraud and fake news. I do think you mentioned this before. It is so important to listen critically. And if you find yourself agreeing, I have to remind myself this time, if I find myself agreeing with everything that somebody says, like on a podcast I might listen to a lot, I kind of check myself, because what are the odds, right? I mean, a lot of times somebody's just wise and they really have a lot of good points, but there are definitely people that I agree with a lot of the time. And there are times where I go, I'm not with you on that, so you got to kind of do that. But it's tough in the world we live in. And I wonder how much of it is, would you say that propaganda is now more pervasive because there are so many ways to reach the individual? Like, propaganda, I guess, in World War I was what, like you said, the posters and things. Yeah. There was World War II. People were dropping Big Macs and blue jeans on Russia or whatever. Yeah. And then, you brought up all the stuff Hitler did with making movies and stuff. But now, every screen you're on, somebody could potentially how much is that just advertisement, somebody trying to get your money, and how much of it is like propaganda from a specific group? I guess it's hard to tell.
I think it with me, and again, to be clear, we are not like objective people. We have opinions and biases that we try to keep off the show and barely hide. But, we have views on things. But just realizing that, going back and forth between Fox and CNN, there's one universe where AOC apparently, for a single Congress person has a lot of power. And then on the other side, I've been stunned how many times I check into CNN and the My Pillow CEO is somehow the lead story. I don't know what he's doing that still, that he has a big influence on things. But I think it's, the quote from them is, propaganda lies, the danger lies when competing voices are silenced. And I think it's dangerous when we silence ourselves to not be aware of what's on the other side, even if it's just to check yourself, to realize that you're scratching that itch, and that, what either of these companies are doing this to profit. They know what motivates you. They know the permanent negative campaign, and to get that reaction out of you, to be aware of that. I mean, I think I will indulge myself in propaganda things. There's times where I'll read something because I want to almost hate read it. It's like, I want to feel better about myself. I'm going to read what this stupid person I disagree with had to say. Mm-hmm. Sorry, My Pillow CEO. But, and I think the danger is when you kind of you lock yourself and don't realize that you're only subjecting yourself to propaganda.
Correct. And you brought up the key point, which is, when somebody's not allowed to speak. And I think that's really the bigger problem. I mean, if Fox News can pretty much say whatever they want, CNN can say whatever they want, and I'm sorry, nobody cares about MSNBC.
Right.
Or OAN or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then, okay, that's one thing, because it may be harder and harder to try to recognize it and not be swayed by it, but at least there's an open forum. The problem comes when, a group of people does not want doesn't want certain opinions to even be allowed to be discussed or said. That is, scary. That's censorship. It's 1984 and all that stuff. So it goes beyond propaganda.
Yeah, I think we've seen that a lot with the Joe Rogan attacks that have happened lately, that he's been singled out, and in the realm of propaganda, a very narrow focus of things that he's discussed over the years. The guy has had a range of people on both sides of the aisle, talking about a range of subjects. I mean, I think if you wanted to truly undermine the guy, talk about how much he focuses on Bigfoot and pot would be maybe one way to do it. But he's somebody that he had a guest on years ago, right, that discussed what an mRNA, did I say it correctly, vaccine
mRNA.
is. This was when President Trump was speeding through the vaccine and getting it done. It was right before it was about to come out. And he had a professor from Yale explain how the vaccine worked. And, I was somebody who is certainly pro-vaccine way before this happened. And I will virtue signal. I've got 2 shots and a booster, and I was pro-vaccine before it was cool. Listen to Robert Banquette's history of vaccination if you want to understand what I thought about before all this stuff came up.
Steve is a vaccine enthusiast.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. And just to it's the selective reading of things. And I think that's what is scary, to see people singled out, that because you stray off the map a little bit.
Yeah, and I sometimes wonder where it even comes from, because a lot of people that get this treatment, I remember just all of a sudden, I mentioned this when we were talking to Stacia Patwell, all of a sudden people, especially women, were all of a sudden like, oh, you listen to Joe Rogan? Oh my gosh, you're a pariah. It's like, he's a pariah. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, what? What? And there's never, and that's the thing with a lot of these people, whether it's Dave Chappelle or whatever, they're never cogent arguments.
Right.
Is cogent the right word? There's never the argument. It's just the, we all know that this person is the worst, and let's shut him down. Which, by the way, I do have to say, there was some breaking news this morning. I don't know if you heard about this. An artist that has come up on the show a couple times that we like, Neil Young, came out and said, "Hey, it's either me or Joe Rogan." He's really upset about Joe Rogan. I actually have no idea why, but he's always been real far left. And I just want to say, I love Harvest Moon. I love Silver and Gold. I love Harvest. You against Joe Rogan is a tough call, but I think Joe Rogan's going to be all right. So
I think that they should settle in the ring. I would pay to see that. That would be good.
I would too. Yeah. I think of all the music. I mean, I can't say all because there are musical artists that are absolutely horrible people, but I love some of their music, and I don't think Neil Young's a horrible person. I'm not saying that, but as far as just personality wise, do I want to see Joe Rogan like put him in a, leg lock or something? Yeah, that'd be fun. But I still want to listen to his music.
I'm just going to pretend that this is Neil Young's foray into MMA, that he's waited. He's like, I've done everything I could do with music. Now it's time to become a human cockfighter, and Joe Rogan's the guy that I'm going to take down to make this happen.
I'm just trying to picture him like, after the fight, he gets his butt kicked. He's like, Aurora Borealis, like just his stupid voice. But I love Neil Young. I do love it. It doesn't sound like it right now, but
no. His ring robe would be a giant flannel shirt, like an 8 foot long flannel shirt that he would wear.
Right. And then he'd bring in a guitar. Oh, you know what that you're making me think of? And now that we're just completely off the map here, which is, what was that thing on MTV? Celebrity Deathmatch on MTV? That's pretty good.
Make it a real thing.
It was Eddie Vedder versus Scott Stapp. I mean, there are some really epic fights. I think Neil Young versus Joe Rogan would be a good one. They should bring it back.
They should. And maybe this is the way that they'll do it. Maybe this is all a long con from MTV and Neil Young to make themselves relevant again and take out Joe Rogan.
Or this is all just propaganda by us that we want Celebrity Deathmatch to come back.
Yeah. So speaking of propaganda, to kind of sum it up, propaganda began with the Catholic Church in their official office to bring their faith to the peoples. Continued for years and still is going. The modern sense of propaganda came into being during World War I, where we saw first used against the Germans and then used by the Germans in the subsequent World War. And, still continues today. I think we see it a lot in our modern media with just one side talking past another. And again, propaganda, when it's propaganda, it's not, you can deal with it. But, to have a situation where competing voices are silenced or unchecked, and you can, to quote Ice Cube, check yourself, watch the other programs, see what the My Pillow CEO is up to. And most importantly, if there is going to be a fight between Joe Rogan and Neil Young in a cage, I want to be involved somehow. I don't know how. I don't know if I'm going to pick out the flannel shirt to be sewn into his ring robe, but Scott and I need to be there. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to Origin of Speakcies. As always, please give us a rating and review on iTunes. Check out our website, speakcies.com, and then our store, which is speakcies.com/store. If you would like to support us beyond that, we would appreciate you becoming a Speakcies supporter by going to patreon.com/speakcies. And there are all sorts of options for, as Steve says, option for every income, which is true. And there are all sorts of things you can get, like Uncut, where Steve and I, believe it or not, this show kind of was like an Uncut in a few areas because we had some just good banter and talk. But that's what Uncut is, and there are also other podcasts that you can access as well. So, with that being said, I think it's time. Bob's your uncle.
Watch out for bears and hail us from the dome.
Speakcies.